Welcome back, everybody, to the 2020 Water Educator Network Symposium. I'm Scott Williamson with Water Education Colorado, and I'm pleased to introduce Mary Dawson from Aurora Water to talk about H2O Outdoors, role-playing Colorado water scenarios. Mary, take it away.
As Scott said, I'm Mary Dawson, Senior Environmental Education and Outreach Specialist at Aurora Water. I've worked for the city of Aurora for around 13 years now. When I first started with the city, I worked in environmental programs, and through their stormwater compliance permit, I had to do non-point source water education. So about 3 years ago, we combined all of our education efforts into a dedicated environmental education department, of which we're very proud of. And so here I am today talking about H2O Outdoors. And I love this program, so I'm very excited to do that. So H2O Outdoors, understanding Colorado's water resources and the decision-making processes for solving real-world water problems. And that's a lot of word salad to say that we're going to have these students to role play as if they were making those, they were the water professionals making those real-world decisions. So let's get started. So what is it? What is H2O Outdoors? It is a free, yes, free, and I mean it, standards-based program hosted at Keystone Science School, just off the grounds of Keystone Ski Resort. It's open to all Colorado high school students. They're going to learn where their water comes from. They're going to learn a little water law, water quality, and what is a watershed. And then they're going to finish up a mock town hall where the students come up with solutions to real-world water problems, all the while advocating from the position of an assigned stakeholder. Now, here are the partners. There we all are. So the funding partners are us, Aurora Water, Denver Water, and of course Keystone Science School, because we could not do it without them. A little history behind our participation in the program. About 10 years ago, my colleague Natalie Curtin was approached by Dave Miller from Keystone Science School at what I believe was the CAEE conference. And he told her that the science school and the Colorado River District had a program for teenagers, and would Aurora be interested in partnering? Well, at the time, we really didn't have any programming for teenagers, so of course, we were on board. So Natalie and I drove up for the next programming and knew right away that H2O Outdoors was something very unique and something very special. So after this first programming, we knew that Denver Water would want to know about this, so we contacted Matt Bond, and the rest is history. You know, we provide funding for the program, we provide the administrative costs for the program, and a per student cost as well. We also provide expert instruction to the Keystone Science School counselors, because we want them to teach the program. And we also participate in a in-person one-day training event for the program, usually the day before the actual program itself. So our program goals, there's quite a few, but they're pretty simple too. We want students to know what it's like to know what a watershed is. Not that that building they talk about, you know, when we ask them what is a watershed, where the water flows off of, but it's kind of close, right? And what watershed do they live in, and how to recognize watersheds around them. We want them to know where their water comes from and the demand on those water resources. We want to explain first in time, first and right, you know, a little water law as best we can. You know, it's pretty complicated here in the state, so we want to stay at that 30,000 feet level. We really want them to become water literate, and it's very important. We want them to recognize the scarcity of clean, fresh water, and we want them to see water issues through the eyes of stakeholders that might have a differing viewpoint than they have themselves. And we want them to collaborate and advocate from that viewpoint. It's very important that that viewpoint many times be different from their own point of view. And in all that, we want them to learn how to collect field data, then to see how that science is relevant to the water quality and water quantity in our state. Okay, those stakeholders that we talk about. Oh, excuse me, I got forward. Schedule overview. The best way to talk about the program is really to talk about the schedule, because that is the program. Day one is the arrival, and part of the price that we pay for the program is transportation costs. We don't want money or buses or anything to get in the way of these students and their experience. The Keystone Science School staff make runs with their multi-passenger van over to the Front Range, over to the Western Slope, and they pick up students from designated pickup locations and take them back to the school. As students get to the school, they get their room assignments, they get their program itinerary, and yeah, some of them are a little nervous at times and they get a little quiet, but I guarantee it doesn't take them long to just jump right in and be part of the program. Now, we do talk about watersheds. We want them to understand watersheds, and what better place to learn about a watershed than standing on top of the Continental Divide. When we talk about the 80-20 principle and you're looking on one side and looking off on the other, it's a pretty effective outdoor classroom that's just right near the Keystone Science School. When we get back from Loveland Pass, is where you take the students, we have an expert panel. Now, I said the students will be assigned stakeholder roles, but before those roles are assigned, then they have to actually meet their stakeholders. So we have an expert panel made up of water professionals or water professionals who are pretty familiar with that stakeholder, and we have a kind of a speed dating afternoon. So the students move from panel to panel talking about these stakeholders and asking questions about their viewpoints of water and what water means to them. So that lasts a couple of hours, and then it's the evening program where they're actually assigned their water stakeholders. And as I said, oftentimes these stakeholders are different from their own point of view. And for example, one time we assigned a stakeholder of Denver Water to a student who was from Dillon, and she burst out into tears. And she said, "No, I can't have Denver Water. I can't have Denver Water." And we said, "Why?" I mean, it was a very emotional response. And she says, "My parents hate Denver Water." So of course, she was Denver Water. So it worked out really well in the end, and we'll talk about that later. But it's really sometimes a visceral response on some of these, depending on what they've heard at home or what they've heard on the news or anything like that. So it makes it an interesting aspect of the program. Now, here are some stakeholders that we used in our 2019 program. You can see it is a broad range of stakeholders, and they're pretty vast. And there will be multiple students for each stakeholder, since we have about 30 students or more. But that's good, because it helps. Some students are more of the talker, some students are more the doer. So it works out well when they have multiple students per stakeholder. So day 2, as you can see, it's pretty jam-packed. We talk about water rights first, and they get a little lesson in first in time, first in right, by lining them up for breakfast hall and according to age. And we have the staff conveniently run out of food as those younger, more junior students approach their breakfast. And you can also do this with snacks and candy along the day. But let me tell you, it's pretty effective when you have hungry campers trying to cajole and buy and pry food away from those more senior students there in the front of the line. So it's pretty effective when we're talking about water rights and first in time, first in right. After that, we talk about plumbing the Colorado, and that's certainly an exercise that really brings home the turnover allocation and how much downstream states really depend on the Colorado River Basin for not only their drinking water, but also for agriculture. As more and more of the water is removed from the bucket, some really insightful observations come from the students, especially when we get towards the Mexican states. And so often in the program, there's just no more water to give. So a lot of great discussion points out of that. After that, students are broken up into field groups. So we're going to go out and do a little bit of water testing. We do water quality surveys. We talk about water resource strategies. We discuss the scarcity of fresh water on the planet. And then we want the students to discuss their own water footprint and water conservation. That evening, after they get back, they receive a little lesson in respectful collaboration, and so that they can help them prepare for the next day's mock town hall. And here comes the role play, and absolutely my favorite day. Favorite day of all. This is the third day, the town hall meeting, where students come together and taking everything that they've learned over the past 2 days. They are given a real world problem, and then they're asked to come to a conclusion and actually create policy, advocating in the voice of that stakeholder. So the students are asked to divide up in representative groups, go and negotiate when they're given a real world water plan or water problem, and then to see what they can live with and what they can't. So after they negotiate and they talk about this problem and how they could fix it or what they need or what they want or what they just do not like or don't want any part of it, then they come back and they talk about that. And they go, okay, we do a survey of each group and go, what can you live with? So we get a thumbs up if they really like what we're advocating. We get a huge thumbs down if it's no way, I can't live with that. And we get a lot of that to begin with. Or we have some stakeholders, just like in real life, that it really doesn't pertain to them at all, and they're really neutral in this. So we're going to get a sideways thumb on that one. But those are the students who help collaborate and work with the other students to try to meet a consensus. It happens every time. Not that we tell them that, it just happens that way. So then they get back together, they have a discussion, and then a lot of respectful debate goes on, and they come up with a great answer. Actually, the answers that they come up with, we take back many times to our water professionals at home and say, look, this is what a bunch of 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds and 15-year-olds came up with. I think you could take a lesson from this. So we let the town hall develop on its own. We really don't step in, except one time, I guess it was a couple of years into our programming, and one of the students was advocating for a frontier age farming family. And so he was going to sell some of his family water rights to a front range water provider, probably Aurora. So anyway, so of course he was bold, and he was playing the role in a fantastic way until he goes, and he thought this was a huge number. He's going to sell these rights for $34,000. And so I had to jump in at that point and go, no, 34 million. He goes, million? And I says, yes, million. He goes, really? I go, really? So his eyes got big at the thought of $34 million for just a few water rights. But I think as his eyes got big, so I did those dollar signs in them. But it was certainly a realization that when you're negotiating with these water rights, can get pretty expensive. So this is just an overview of our participants from our 2019 program that we had in October. We had 30 students from 13 different high schools representing 10 cities and towns across Colorado. They were from Front Range and East Slope to West Slope. And then also, if you'll see there on the bottom left, and take a look at these graphs as you go to the right, we give a pre-test to the students right when they arrive. And then after the town hall, we provide them with a post-test. Now, you can definitely see that how much their knowledge of water increases there from 29% to begin with to 100% at the end. How the water issues affect their daily life, and even the percentage of students, how much it increases from understanding where their water comes from. It's really important. So we love to see those test results, because it shows that it's sinking in, it's getting there. So that's the program, and I'm particularly proud of our students from Aurora. We always have a good showing there at the program, and yes, we all want to champion water and water issues and environmental issues in the state, but that's not really why I do this. That's not really why I do this program. This is not why I'm passionate about it, because it's just not my main objective, and I'll tell you why. Many of our school participants, our high school students here in Aurora, they're never going to get to the mountains on their own, not as students. Many of them, most of them, don't ski, they don't have the transportation, and they don't have the resources to even spend any amount of time in Colorado's mountains and high country. So that's why I think that it's our obligation as a utility to provide the funding and to get them there. Let me tell you a story, and I will already excuse myself and apologize for getting emotional, because this is an emotional event that drives my passion for this particular program. It was probably our first year partnering with Keystone Science School. We had a teacher that had taken our Aurora Water Forest to Faucets workshop the year before, and she taught at Aurora's alternative high school, or at least one of them. And she wanted to register her class to come up to H20 Outdoors. And so when they arrived, they met the other students that were already there for the program, and they just happened to be an 8th grade class from Summit County. Now, as those 8th graders, I wish you could have seen their faces as they watched the students from Aurora, get out of the van. They were certainly inner city schools students that these kids from Summit County had not necessarily seen before. So it didn't take long. They got together. The programming was extremely successful. The older students from Aurora mentored the younger students, and it was a great thing to see. But the most important thing was the evening of the first night. One of the students, he was came into our Mike. He's one of our counselors there, and he worked with the River District at the time, and he has 30 years teaching experience, and he's a retired teacher. So we love it when Mike comes up and works as one of the facilitators, and so he stays overnight and chaperones. So the student came in and he says, "Mr. Mike, I need to call my mom." And Mike, I said, was a teacher of teenagers for over 30 years. So he thinks, yeah, right, you need to call your mom. Because at the time, we did take their phones. And so he goes, "No, Mr. Mike, I need to call my moms. I need to call my moms." And he was very persistent, and he kept going on and on. And so Mike just finally relented and says, "Fine, you can call your mom if you call her right here in front of me." And so the student goes, "Fine." Mike hands him his phone, and, a little smugly probably, and the student, puts in the number. And the first thing he said was, "Mom, I saw the Continental Divide. I saw the Continental Divide." And then he proceeds to tell his mother about his experience, explaining what it was like. And I can guarantee you at that moment, and maybe the first moment, that he experienced being on top of the world, not only literally, but figuratively. Now, Mike said he had to turn over so that the kid couldn't see his tears, but he continued to tell his mom about his experience. And if he has that much passion and that much pride in a day, then it behooves me to have that much more passion to make sure that this program continues and to get our students there. So that's what motivates me, that story, that student, that one day, and the effect it had, because I really believe that this changes lives. So we are very committed that going forward, that whatever happens, financially in the years ahead of us now, it's very important that we find the funding for this program. Because yes, they do get a lot of water education, they retain a lot of water education, and they make important decisions before they leave. But we have a gratitude circle that what comes out of that gratitude circle is just amazing. And so they're learning much more than water education. And so anyway, that's my passion for this program, and our continued dedication to keep it going. So with that, I will go on to if there are any questions, I would be glad to answer them.